We continue now at the top of Daf Samach Amud Aleph and Meseches Zevachim. This is Zevachim Daf 61a. On the previous summit, the Gemara was discussing the halacha that if the Mizbeach is damaged, if part of the Mizbeach is missing, so then Kachim Kalim are not able to be eaten. And the Gemara asked from the previous summit that there's a contradiction in Brises in terms of when the Mishkan is traveling, whether Kachim become possible or not, whether Kachim become disqualified or not. And the Gemara understood on the previous summit that the discussion has to do with the fact that the Mizbeach is removed when the Mishkan was traveling, and so there's no Mizbeach, and it's the difference between Kachim Kachim and Kachim Kalim. Kachim Kachim would be disqualified, but not Kachim Kalim, and that seems to be a question against, again, what we said earlier, that Kachim Kalim cannot be eaten when the Mizbeach is damaged. And so the Gemara now continues and answers. The difference in the brises is Harav Yishmael, Harabanan, actually the two brises, it's not that one brise is talking about Kachim Kachim, and one is talking about Kachim Kalim, rather one of the brises is Rabbi Yishmael, because that entire halacha that Kachim Kalim cannot be eaten when the Mizbeach is damaged, as we said in the previous summit, just follows the opinion of Rabbi Yishmael. That's the one that would say that it's disqualified. But again, the other brisa which says there's no disqualification, that would follow the Rabbanon. Rashi explains Rabbi Yishmael, the Yolif Basar Midam. Rabbi Yishmael is the one that learns the meat from the blood. Again, that was on the previous summit. That says that the meat would be disqualified in a situation where the Mizbeach is damaged. And Basraisa Rabbanon, and then the latter brisa will follow the Rabbanon who disagree with Rabbi Yishmael. And the Gemara continues with another answer. If you want, I could say we can explain the two brises as follows. Both brises are actually talking about Kachei Kachim, so really there should be a disqualification. Why would one brisa seem to say there's not? Umay b'shnei mekomos. What is that brisa which seems to say there's no disqualification? It talks about shnei mekomos, two locations, which we understood to mean that there's no mizbeach. Those are the two locations. Sometimes it's a situation with a mizbeach, sometimes without a mizbeach, but that's not really what it means. What it actually means is Kodem Shiamidu Leviim Es HaMishkan, before the Leviim, before they put up the Mishkan. And Rashi explains, V'iba Yisem, if you want, I could say, Basraisa Nami B'Kachei Kachim, that the latter brisa also is talking about Kachei Kachim, and the Kachei Kachim are not disqualified. And what does that brisa mean? Ushnei Mekomos, when the brisa says that the Kachei Kachim can be eaten in two locations, Lav La'achar Shenosu Dinistalik HaMizbeach Kamar. It's not like we originally interpreted that we're talking about that when they travel and there's no mizbeach, that there's not going to be a disqualification of Kachei Kachim, because in that case, there actually would be a disqualification of Kachei Kachim. But rather, what does it mean two locations the Kachei Kachim can be eaten? One location where Kachei Kachim can be eaten is the normal typical situation when there's a Mishkan. And then the second location that Kachei Kachim can be eaten, that's talking in a situation where they took down the beams of the Mishkan, they took down the curtains of the Chatzir, v'adayin hamizbeach b'mekomo. But the Mizbeach is still in the proper place, and the point over here is that latter brisa is talking in a situation where the Mizbeach was not removed, and that's why the Kachei Kachim are not disqualified. And Rashi over here notes, v'kodem sheyamidu Leviim es Mishkan, the text that we have in our Gemara is before the Leviim put up the Mishkan. Rashi says, D'nakan hacha lav dafka, that really is not precise, because we're really specifically talking when they are undoing the Mishkan, not when they're putting up the Mishkan. Lav dafka nakat. And how do we know that we can't be talking about when the Mishkan is put up? Maybe we're talking when the Mishkan is put up in a situation, again, talking about where there's a Mizbeach. But chada de lo mashkach lo, you're not going to have a scenario like that. Sharei kodem sheyachanu b'nei kahas nosei hamizbachos hayuchonin b'nei gershon u'merari nosei hamishkan. Before the b'nei kahas who were carrying the Mizbeach, before they camped, the b'nei gershon and merari, they would camp on Mekimin Oso, and they would put it up with an Isiyasam, and then when they traveled, Hayumoridin es HaMishkan Tchila, that's when they would take down the Mishkan first. In other words, the point is, when they were traveling, the Mishkan would come down first. You could have a scenario where there would be no Mishkan, but there would be a Mizbeach. But when they were coming into camp, there you would not have such a scenario, because the Mishkan would be put up first, and then the Mizbeach. V'nosim b'nei Gershon u'merari achar degel rishon, the b'nei Gershon u'merari, they would carry after the first degel, uv'nei kahas achar shnei degalim, and then the b'nei kahas would come after two degalim, kadeshu kodmin b'nei Gershon b'chaniyas, and that way the b'nei Gershon, they would actually be first, again, in putting up the Mishkan, u'ma'amidin es ha-Mishkan, they would put up the Mishkan, lifnei bo b'nei kahas, before the b'nei kahas came, and again, they were carrying the Mizbachos, kedichsiv achar masa degel b'nei Yehuda, v'huret ha-Mishkan, again, as it says in the Psukim, v'achar shnei degalim ksiv v'nasu ha-kahasim, nosei ha-mikdash, dehainu oron, u'mizbachos, u'chli shares, v'hekimu b'nei Gershon es ha-Mishkan ad boam shal b'nei kahas. again, the Bnei Gershon, they would put up the Mishkan before the Bnei Kohath would come, and that's why the text over here, when it says Kodem She'amidu Leviim Hes HaMishkan, that's Lav Dafka, that's not precise, because in terms of putting up the Mishkan would actually go up first, and then the Mizbeach. And Rashi also says, V'yod, and further, Ibishashinu Es HaSeder Mukemes Lo. Let's say you'll try to answer. Sometimes they might have changed the order. Maybe sometimes the Mizbeach would actually be put up first before the Mishkan, but then Hechi Shachti Karbonos Kodem She'amidu Mishkan. That's actually not possible, because they wouldn't be able to slaughter the Karbonos before the Mishkan is put up. Ha'amar Be'ezeu Mekoman, because we say earlier in Ezeu Mekoman, B'shlamim Sheshachtan Kodem She'amidu Leviim Psulim. We actually say, when the Shlamim are slaughtered again before Kodem She'amidu Mishkan, that's actually disqualified. So again, that would not be possible to say that they changed the order, the Mizbeach was put up first and there was no Mishkan, because then you couldn't slaughter the Karbonos. V'garzus law, now Rashi says if you do have the gears in our Gemara, you could say like this, Muki la b'shishinu es ha-seder. You could say maybe our Gemara is talking where they do change the order, and the Mizbeach is put up first and then the Mishkan. V'yahu de'ezo mekoman, and then you could say that earlier Gemara, which says that the slaughtered Karbonos are disqualified, Shlamim davka kamar, maybe that's only Karban Shlamim, but other types of Karbonos would not be disqualified. Mishum dechsib behu v'shachtu pesach ol moed, because by Shlamim it says it has to be slaughtered at the entrance of the ol moed, and then you would just say v'lo yolav shar kodshim minayu, that we wouldn't learn other kodshim from Shlamim, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Samech Aleph Amud Beis.